Is there life after death? What will happen to you after you die? Is there something called heaven? Is there something called hell, the counterpart of heaven? What are we to think of these very important, traditionally firmly held assumptions? What are we to think of it today? Do I have something to say on these matters? I'm afraid I have. I'm offering these thoughts with a great deal of trepidation, offering them very timidly and tentatively, in the hope that what I share with you through this video, which please forgive me if it happens to be a little longer than usual, I'll try and make it shorter if possible. What are we to think of these issues, living as we do at the beginning of the 21st century? First of all, let me say that I believe that there is heaven and hell here upon this earth. About this, I'm absolutely sure. But I'm not so sure if hell, as it is described or as it is taken to be, will be a reality beyond the death of human beings. About heaven as the perpetuation of the happy, blissful, joyous state of life that we are entitled to attaining here upon this earth is a possibility that I will not discount. But hell, as it is traditionally described, where a malicious God takes delight in consigning to undying flames people who have incurred his displeasure or his wrath, is something that I cannot square up with the compassionate and loving nature of God. More of that in due course. First, let me tell you something about heaven and hell as they are real for our life here upon this earth, life before death. For the life of me, I can't understand why people are more interested in life after death and not interested in life before death. As a matter of fact, our indifference to life before death is directly proportionate to our keenness in life after death, which is in itself an anomaly, a strange situation, but I propose to say nothing more about it for want of time. Let me come straight to my idea of heaven and hell upon this earth. I believe that human beings are given the option to choose two different qualities of life, two different conditions of life, or two different human predicaments, if you like. It's possible for us to live a joyous life. It's also possible for us to live a miserable, hellish life. That choice is mostly in our hands, though I must say that circumstances or circumstantial details do play a big role. But at the same time, I also believe that human beings, unlike to other animals, is given the power to transcend the limitations of their material circumstances. In other words, we don't have to be entirely defined, determined, and limited by our material circumstances or worldly predicaments. It's given to us to transcend the given predicament. I do believe in this very ardently because that's part of my own experience. It's an experiential truth that I cannot deny. Now, in order to understand this idea of heaven and hell before death, let's take married life. I believe that if there is heaven on this earth prior to death. It's a joyous family life. A man being happily, healthily, wholesomely, joyously united with a woman, a normative man with a normative woman, or a true man with a true woman, in the purity of their mutual love, in which one melts into the other. The essence of the man melts into the essence of the woman, as is envisaged in the Bible in the very first book, the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 22 to 24, where it's said that therefore a man will leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That's the state I'm referring to. That's why I use the word melting into the other. You can't become one flesh with a woman, or a woman cannot become one flesh with a man unless both melt into the other, or they melt into each other. You can't hold on to your granite or laterite or flinty ego and then become one flesh with anybody else. Then it would only be a clash of two stones that does not produce one fleshness. It produces lifelong friction, and that's why we talk about gender wars. Gender wars necessarily result when two flinty individuals, one apparently a man, the other apparently a woman, come together within the bracket of what is considered to be holy matrimony. There cannot be anything more unholy than such a matrimony, and the resultant misery. So if there is heaven on this earth, I believe, most sincerely I believe, it is the happy union of a true man, a normative man, one who is male in the true sense of the term, with a female in the true sense of the term, a proper help to each other, becoming one in the fairness of love, the purifying fairness of love. And the resultant blissful existence is to me heaven on this earth. Correspondingly, and I say this in all seriousness, if there is hell on this earth, it's a relationship between a man and a woman, both apparently male and female, but are not really male and female, are anything but male and female. But they come together for whatever reasons, maybe for practical convenience, because of social compulsions generated by this prevailing notion that if you are of a certain age, you should be married, irrespective of what your orientation is, what your state of mental health is, what your idea about married life is, what your capacity for building relationship is, so on and so forth. This is how hell is created on this earth. And particularly when a normative female marries an apparent male, say for example a homosexual man, or a normative male marries an apparent female, that is to say a lesbian woman, that's my definition of hell upon this earth. Make no doubt about it. Now, but that is not, I'm using this as an illustration, but that's not the general idea of heaven and hell that I want to present you. My idea of hell upon this earth is living completely confined to what may be called apparent life as distinguished from real life. We are not living our life in truth and in spirit. That's why almost everyone feels suffocated, everyone feels hemmed in. Nobody is able to express himself or herself. Nobody is free. Everybody lives in resentment. Everybody is full of grievances. Everybody is choked. We are not able even to relate to ourselves because we do not know who we are. What is the true self? No one really knows. And the reason why we do not know who we really are is not that it is unknowable, but that we are submerged in this untrue life or apparent life. This world is full of apparent things. And here I must make a reference to the Hindu doctrine of Maya. I consider that to be a very profound doctrine of worldly existence. Hindus believe that the only reality is Brahma, God, and though everything in the phenomenal world is related to Brahma, the phenomenal world, items or aspects of the phenomenal world are not real, because the element of Brahma or Brahma, as it expresses itself in the form of whatever we see in the phenomenal world, passes through the distorting medium of time. God exists in eternity, we exist in time. Between eternity and time, there is a medium, as a medium of distortion, like light which is colorless, passing through a prism, getting broken down into 7 colors, Vibgyor, the colors of the rainbow. A distortion takes place. So on this side of the prism, people look at these 7 different colors, and each one comes to a conclusion that light is violet. Another person says light is indigo. Another person says light is necessarily blue. Another person says light is yellow. Another person says light is orange, so on and so forth. And each person fights with the other, saying this alone is real. Light is blue, light is green, light is indigo, light is orange, red, so on and so forth. But none of us is living in the light. We are living in the red, we are living in the orange, we are living in the indigo, so on and so forth, but not living in the light. Living in the light alone is true life. Living confined to one of the constituent colors that result from the refraction of light, which is a distortion of light. Though the refracted element is part of the original light, it is still not the light. So it is a semblance of that light. It is connected to that light, but it is not the light. That's how we are living today. And life lived in this semblance of the light, which is what I call the apparent light, as against the true light, that is bound to be miserable. If I put it differently, life lived only according to whatever is partial, as against lived according to the wholeness of things. For example, if a man and a woman enter into a relationship, together they can seek the fullness of that relationship. What does it mean to be in a man-woman relationship in its totality? It's a matter of continuous seeking, but seeking together with oneness of the spirit, that one fleshness that the Bible talks about. Instead, what happens is that the man and the woman pull in 2 different directions, and the result is misery. So both are living apparent lives. From an outward perspective, or to a third party, it would seem that they are man and wife, but essentially they are like 2 horses attached to a cart, one pulling forward and the other pulling backwards. So you can imagine the plight of the horse cart. So the relationship is like the horse cart, which is pulled in 2 opposite directions by the husband and wife, the man and the woman, and the result has to be unending misery. I don't know how people survive for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, but they do survive, which is a miracle in itself. So this is hell upon this earth. And those who are living in this apparent life are entitled to only this miserable existence, the misery of which they try to hide in so many ways, and those ways are familiar. I need not present an omnibus list of those ways. Again, it would be also very time consuming. Now, let me come to the true life. The true life, as I said, is life lived according to the light before it suffers refraction. But then you can very well tell me that this world is a life of refraction. Yes, it is. As it is, it's a world of refraction. But to human beings is given the particular power which is not given to any other member of the animal kingdom or any other form of life, to the extent that we know our knowledge is limited in these respects. To human beings alone is given this power to intuit is the word I use, not know, intuit the true light, even when our life is confined to the possibilities within the refracted spectrum of the VIBGYOR, violet, indigo, blue, green, orange, yellow, red. Though we are living in a world which is the sum total of apparent things, even through the apparent things, we can actually intuit the real life. For example, if you happen to have the singular blessedness of having a proper father, a loving, affectionate, noble father, through that fatherly love, you can intuit the love of God as the Father in heaven. That's why Jesus revealed God as a heavenly Father. If you happen to have the singular blessedness of being married in a joyous, healthy manner, as envisaged in the biblical teaching, the two shall become one flesh, then you can intuit what it means to be a member of the true church, which is the body of Jesus Christ. I don't think churches as they exist today can claim themselves to be the body of Jesus Christ. If this is the body of Jesus Christ, Jesus is miserable indeed. Jesus is in perpetual hell. Truly I say to you, if this is the body of Jesus Christ, then rest assured, Jesus is not ascended to heaven, he is in hell. And who constitute his hell? We constitute. We as Christians. We as members of various denominations which are abominations in the sight of God. We constitute the hell of Jesus Christ. And obviously, if we constitute the hell for Christ, we also constitute hell for ourselves. That's why I say that there is hell upon this earth. And the misery that every individual lives within the relationships or relationship that he builds for himself. I'm particularly referring to man-woman relationship, husband-wife relationship, and therefore also domestic relationships in their totality. They will all be reflective of this hell that we create for God. So if we create hell for God, then it is necessary that we partake of the hell that we create. Because what we give, we also have to endure. So this is my rough idea about heaven and hell before death. Now, what about heaven and hell after death? As I said right at the outset, I don't believe that hell as it is described in the scriptures, a description that goes back a long time, is a particularly spiritual idea. But I take the idea of heaven, which is the idea of life continuing beyond death. I take that very seriously. But where do I differ from the conventional teaching? It is in this respect that I believe that only true life is real, apparent life, or life lived in terms of the various shadows of life, various semblances of life, various appearances of life, cannot be real, and what is not real cannot endure. For example, you stand in front of a mirror. You see yourself in the mirror. What you see in the mirror is not the real you, it's the apparent you. It's the apparent you. Now you move away from that mirror what happens? The apparent you also disappears. Now, where does that apparent you go? It goes into nothingness. It ceases to exist. But you don't cease to exist just because you step aside of the mirror. But your shadow, your mirror image, your apparent self ceases to exist. That's how I understand life after death. I believe that human death is similar to our stepping away from the mirror. In other words, I believe that our life in the present is like standing in front of a mirror, where we see ourselves in a mirror. And I borrow this image not from any other source, but from St. Paul, where he says in the 13th chapter of the first letter to Corinthians, a chapter that's very familiar to all of us, where he says, now we see as though in a mirror. Now we see as though in a mirror. And I'm pretty sure that this is what St. Paul meant, though I've not read a single interpretation of this chapter, this very famous passage wherein Paul gives us the most unforgettable insights into the meaning and nature of love. There's nothing comparable to Paul's hymn to love anywhere in world literature. And I say that with great confidence. And there he says, now we see as though in a mirror, like in a mirror. And Paul is saying that our life within time and space is a life of appearances, but even though we are confined to this matrix of appearances, this XY axis, time and space axis, the matrix of time and space, to the extent that we are spiritually born again, spiritually enlightened, spiritually awake, we stay connected to the true light, which is God. God is light. God is light not in the sense of the light that we see in the phenomenal world. God is the eternal light. In other words, using the analogy I've already introduced, God is the light before it suffers refraction through the prism of time. God is that one indivisible, united, integrated light, the one light. That's why we say that there's only one God. If God is God, there can be only one God. Just as what corresponds to the 7 colors, the spectrum of colors, 7 colors, is just one light. So what corresponds to the various ideas of God prevalent in this world is that one God. And staying connected to that one God is the only guarantee that we live the true life here upon this earth. And I believe that only life lived in harmony with, in communion with that one true living God, the eternal God, is true life. Everything else is lived according to the futile, barren, meaningless appearances within this matrix of time and space. And those are, no matter how powerful those experiences are, no matter how cherished and valued those experiences are, they are similar to the image that you see in the mirror, so long as you stand in front of the mirror. So what happens to the life of an individual who lives only the apparent life and not the real life or the true life? I suppose his or her death is very much like what happens to the mirror image after the person steps away from the mirror. It just ceases to exist. Whereas a person who leads the true life, and true life is truly himself or herself, that remains. If you're only a shadow, if you're only an image, if you're only an assortment of appearances alone, the apparent life, then you simply cease to exist. And it is the fear of this utter cessation, utter non existence, that actually rattles us when we think about death. Most people don't understand it. They think that, life beyond death is full of this kind of terror, that terror. That's not. The real terror is non existence. The real terror is absolute full stop. The real terror is that there is nothing beyond. Nothingness is the real terror. Emptiness, vacuity, nothingness is the real terror. It's not the undying flame, it's not the undying worm. All that's only upon this earth. Beyond the portals of death, beyond the limitations of this material world, there is either true life or there is nothingness. And to be eligible for the true life beyond death, the eternal life, which is the true life, one has to live the true life here upon this earth, which is possible. Or one has to live according to that true light. That's why God is considered to be light. In all religious literature, in all spiritual traditions, God is recognized as the light. It's in this sense. And Jesus says, I am the light. While I am on this earth, I am the light of the world. Which means that it is possible for human beings to stay connected to that eternal undying light, even while upon this earth. We can become the reflections of that eternal light, just as the moon reflects the light of the sun. And therefore people on earth see the reflected light at night. So also in this world of darkness, it's possible for us to live the life of light, though we are not the light. And that's why Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Not in the sense that we are in ourselves light, but that we can live as though we are the light, or as though we are connected to that light, even in this world of darkness. And it is again referring to this reality that Matthew, when he writes the gospel, quoting the words of prophet Isaiah, says that thanks to the birth of Jesus Christ and thanks to his life upon this earth, those who sat in darkness have seen a great light. That is a profound insight. And the idea that we too are to become the light of the world must be understood in this light. The other option is to live entirely according to the vain shadows of this world, the mirror images of that reality. And it's logically necessary that the mirror image dies when the real object moves away from the mirror and it simply ceases to exist. There's no point in crying over it, because that's the sheer necessity of the logic of creation itself. So there is something called true life. I sincerely believe in it. And there is also something called the futile life, or the life of appearances alone, which is bound to end up in utter futility, utter non-existence. And I again emphasize, it's the fear of this non-existence that we experience as the fear of death. Why? Because we do not know what death is. How can you fear something that you do not know? So we have some idea about what non-existence is. For example, if you want to know the power of non-existence, it's very easy. All you have to do is to stop breathing. Then you experience the non-existence of oxygen. Then you know how terrifying it is. I'm told that of all forms of death, death in water is very terrible, because there you die for want of oxygen. So it is the nothingness that's really terrible. It's not thunder and lightning that's terrible. It is nothingness that is terrible. And therefore people who live according to this vain principle of futility must realize that that life is bound to end up in utter misery, in utter terror, and that terror is then projected to the face of death. So Paul says that because of Jesus Christ, death has lost its sting. It is in this sense that we have to understand it. That death need not have its terror for us, or death need not be a terrifying prospect, provided we live the true life. And it is as a guarantee for this, or as the enabling discipline for this, that Jesus says, abide in me and I in you. We abide in the world, right? The world is a world of appearances alone. So living according to the ways of the world is living in an apparent life, not the real or true life. We have to shift our foundation from that to living the true life. And the simple formula for living the true life, as stated by Jesus Christ, is abiding in Him and He in us. And why does that guarantee living the true life? Because Jesus said, I and my Father are one. So ultimately, it is attaining the state of joyous, blissful oneness with God, the only true living God, the true light of the world, that guarantees the prospect of eternal life. There is no other religious formula for it. No ritual, no doctrine, no dogma will help in any way whatsoever. If anything, they could be hindrances. All the traditional piety, all the inherited notions about denominational zeal, loyalty, etc. All the worldly notions about, pleasing God with money and the grandeur of effort and the magnificence of the buildings that we build for God in the form of churches, mosques, temples, etc. All this is utter nonsense. It has nothing to do with the real life. Real life is what you live. And that is an ongoing process. And the most important thing here is the overall orientation of your life and your personality. Are you oriented towards light, or are you oriented to the darkness of the world? This is the ultimate question. And it's because of this that John, when he writes the gospel, presents Jesus as the light of life. The light of life. In that description, the total idea that I have included in this video is beautifully encapsulated. Except that we have to really meditate over this, decode the meaning in a somewhat strenuous manner, which is something, if undertaken, is guaranteed to give us a lot of happiness and a lot of fulfillment, which is my experience as I can bear witness to. So this is stated approximately my idea of life and death, my idea of life and eternity, life before death, life after death, hell, heaven, so on and so forth. And I offer this, as I said at the outset, only as a catalyst for thought, not as a final doctrine. I'm nobody to offer anybody any final doctrine. I'm still in the process of evolving. I'm only a beginner. I'm only a student. I'm a seeker. And I believe that the greatest blessing in life is to be a seeker. Seek, Jesus said, and you shall find. What you find, you share with others. Because whatever is given to you is to be passed on to others. That's a sacrament of life. Nothing else is. Thank you. Have a blessed time.